Thank you. It's 1980, Tov Mem. I believe that was the year, Lag B'Omer parade. I'm about 17 years old. And I had the zchus to take care of a group of boys. I was like a counselor for that day, for the parade. They brought a lot of children, boys and girls, thousands of them were attending the parade. And many of them were from out of Crown Heights, many of them for Wednesday hour. Not much familiar with all the details of Yiddishkeit. And here I am, a group of boys, gonna make them happy, gonna give them a good time. And we're standing outside in front of 770, and the Rebbe comes out. And unlike other Lag Ba'omers, we know that it's a day that's connected with rain. And we need special brachas that there shouldn't be rain, so it shouldn't rain on the Lag Ba'omer parade. This was a clear, hot, sunny day. The sun was shining. To me, it was like when Hashem took the sun out of its shell, when Avraham Avinu had his bris, in Parshas Vayera. And here I am, and the Rebbe comes out, and the Rebbe is talking. The Rebbe is talking in Yiddish, and Rabbi Hecht, Olav Shalom, Rabbi Yaakov Yud Hecht is translating between the sichos. The sichos were rather long. The sun was beating down, the boys were getting thirsty. And then, the unexpected, the Rebbe starts speaking in Russian. Now, I'm a young bacher, and I could tell you now that I had some questions. Things were bothering me about what was going on. You know, first of all, boys are impatient, they're restless, they're tired, they don't understand Yiddish, and the translations in between the sichos, but what's really keeping them involved during the sichos itself? And their feet are hurting, and now they're hot. I remember I had a sunburn. Many people, all the chassidim, of course, that were in Crown Heights, that were present at the parade, we had a sunburn for the next coming days after Lag B'Omer parade. That's how hot it was. That's how sunny it was. And it's bothering me because I felt the responsibility for the group that I had to make sure they're happy, to make sure that they're entertained, to make sure that it's a pleasant experience for the sake of Yiddishkeit, for the Rebbe's interests, not because I myself was hungry or thirsty or tired or hot. But when the Rebbe started to speak Russian, that's really when I had a little bit of a problem that I was beginning to feel bothered me and didn't let me rest. Why does the Rebbe speak Russian at a parade where there's no Russian children or very few Russian? There were some Russian children, but you're talking percentage-wise, it was a small, tiny, minute group of people that would understand the Rebbe's words, and it's taking so long, and it bothered me for a while, but a chassid knows, Kabbalah Soil, Emunah, B'tochen, you have to know that the Rebbe knows what's going on. Now, this was the period that began. The Cold War was at its peak. The Cold War between America and Russia was in full rage. And they were aiming missiles at each other. They were building up more and more weaponry. They were aiming nuclear warheads at each other. And every political expert predicted that it's going to be sooner or later, but it's a matter of time, and we're going to have a war between the two superpowers of the world, which would lead to, God forbid, terrible things. Sometime after this year, 1980, Tov Mem, the Rebbe has a meeting, a yechidus, a private audience with Professor Branover, Professor Yirmiyah Branover, Sharafu Shlema, and the Rebbe tells him something that no one else dared to predict. The Rebbe said, I want you to build a city. I want you to prepare a city for Russian refugees because there's going to be many Russian refugees coming out of Russia. Never before has there been such an exodus. And we need to prepare for them to have a place and to have income and profession and all the necessary things that so many immigrants are going to need. Okay, the Rebbe tells Professor Branover that things are going to change in Russia, but not right away, a little bit off into the future. But now is the time to prepare. No one predicted this. Around 1990, Tafshin Nun time, Russia crumbled. Communism crumbled, fell apart. No wars, no bloodshed, no gunshots, no missiles. It just fell apart completely and it became a democracy. And the cities that they prepared, and hundreds of thousands of Jews came out of Russia. Many of them went to Eretz Yisrael. The bulk of them went to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe's prophecy was fulfilled. When Professor Branover was in Eretz Yisrael, he lives in Eretz Yisrael, and Mikhail Gorbachev, he was then the prime minister of Russia, was already after he was not in office any longer, but he was in power when this whole shift started. So when he came to Russia, to Eretz Yisrael, to visit Eretz Yisrael, Professor Branover was one of those that were assigned to accompany him as a Russian Jew, as a chassid that could, have a connection with him and influence him. And at one point, Professor Branover says this story that he tells him, I want you to know that in the beginning, early to mid-80s, the Lubavitcher Rebbe predicted all this. And he told me to prepare cities, and he showed him around Eretz Yisrael how many Russian Jews came and how they prepared for them. All this was based on the initiative of the Rebbe. So, Mr. Gorbachev, the Great Chacham, he's a guy after all. He says, how could it be? It's impossible. I myself didn't think of this at that time. But I got to thinking, when this whole thing unfolded, it took me about 10 or 12 years to figure things out. But thanks Hashem, we were taught to analyze and examine everything. And I look back, and I said to myself, the Rebbe was speaking very, very strong words in Russian about the Russian Constitution and how the Russian Constitution allows for learning and studying Yiddishkeit and practicing Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe, all I can remember is the Rebbe saying, Constitutia, so many times in that Sikha. And later I found out that the Rebbe was basically pushing through, breaking through Beruchnius, obviously, that there should be a change and Yiddishkeit should be practiced in Russia freely. And of course, you know that later they had the live telecast of the Hanukkah Live, and it was in the Kremlin, the same Kremlin that did such terrible things against Yidden and against humanity in general. In that same center of Russia, in that same source of terrible evil, there were Yidden lighting the menorah, and it was being broadcasted around the world, and they were receiving from around the world all the other places that were hooked up. And it was by the Rebbe in 770, and it was in Australia, and it was in France by the Eiffel Tower, and it was everywhere. So many places, so many centers in the world. And it happened overnight, and it happened, and nobody even knows, nobody even thinks, nobody even is aware of what just took place. The biggest superpower in the world, other than the United States, with the power to blow up and destroy who knows what, went down silently overnight. And that's when I started saying to myself, the Rebbe used the koyach of the Jewish children, of the thousands and thousands of Yidden that were present on a day like Ba'omer. And it's almost like the Rebbe was saying to me, David, trust me on this one. Work with me. Your feet might hurt you a little bit. You might feel a little bit bad for the children. The children might be a little bit hot. But we have a moment here that everyone together, with the power that we have from so many Yidden together, and so many Yidden that are seeing it around the world, and so many Yidden that are having parades around the world, we could break through something today, but I need your help. We need everyone to do this. I realized later that compared to what the Rebbe accomplished for the whole world, and especially for the Soviet Jews, the Jews in the Soviet Union, at that time it was called the Soviet Union, was a tiny little sacrifice, if you could even call it that, compared to what the Rebbe needed from us at the time. He needed from us a few minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, even a half hour of just trusting the Rebbe that what we're doing now is something we really, really, really want very badly. And we'd be happy to go along with it if we were asked, if we only knew what the Rebbe is giving us. We have to remember one thing, boys. Reb Leibel spoke about Chof Zayin Adar. What is Chof Zayin Adar? Chof Zayin Adar is a time that we are faced with the task of understanding that what we do counts and we're the Rebbe's partners. So much so that we can't see the Rebbe, and now we can't hide behind the Rebbe's own doing things for us. The Rebbe is like moves away, steps aside. Chas v'sholom, not moves away, but the Rebbe steps aside. And the Rebbe says, now what you do counts, because you're going to prove that whatever I taught you is real. Whatever I taught you is true. If I'm going to hold your hand, it's like a father that's teaching a child how to walk, and the child is a little bit insecure, so the child keeps on grabbing Tati's hand. But as long as the Tati holds the child's hand, the child is not walking on his or her own. So we don't have that independence that's so needed for a child to have in order to grow up and be a functioning, productive, independent human being. And everyone will understand that this really comes from the father and the mother that raised him. They raised him so well that he even could do things on his own. Then this is the test. The Rebbe was given the mission by Hashem to raise a generation that want to continue and do the important work of the Rebbe, which is to bring the Shekhinah down here into the world, to bring Mashiach, to build the Beis HaMikdash. But as long as the Rebbe does it, it's like the teacher who's answering the questions on the test. So I said to myself, maybe, that is really what is expected of us, not to know the rest of the story, just like I didn't know the rest of the story back in 1980, which is what, 35 years ago, 36 years ago? Maybe I didn't know the story then. And why didn't I know the story then? Because part of the effect, part of the power that we have is having faith in the Rebbe, having trust in the Rebbe. A soldier doesn't tell a general, no problem, I'm going to go down to that part of the island or that part of the city, and I'm going to do this and this, what you're telling me to do, but just do me a favor. Why? You don't do that. For whatever reason. But first comes the trust. And then we see the rest of the story. And there's so many stories that we see this. I made myself a little bit of a list of things that you see that people, that it appears to them that I mean anything, I count. Whatever I do doesn't mean anything anyway. It's totally insignificant. There's no real importance to what I do. I don't make a difference. Well, let me tell you something. It's because we are so simple, and it's because we are so small, and it's because we feel that we're not important, that it's the most important, that we count more than anyone. And you remember I said something about a teacher before? The teacher wants to prove how well his students are learning. What is a bigger proof? When he takes the best child in the class, the best student in the class, and he sends him in to be tested by the principal or by another person that's testing these boys, and the child does well? No. What the best proof and the most effective results would be when the simple students know very well. We are simple. We can't use that as an excuse. That's only obligating us. Because we're simple and we're little and what we do appears to be not important, that's when it counts most. And that's what the Rebbe is doing with our generation, because we're the last generation. And the last generation, the generations go lower and lower. And Dafka, us, the Rebbe is working with us to finish the job. I was in 770 at Simchas Torah. I'm going to ask Label if you could please tell me when, give me a signal when there's 2 minutes left, if it's not yet, because I lose track. And something very interesting happened that I try to learn Hashgacha Pratis from everything that I see and hear, more than maybe perhaps other people are trying, because everything I see and I hear, I am responsible because I teach other people to use it. And I'm responsible to show my students how to use it. So I'm in tune with learning a lesson from many things. So I was in 770 for Akofis. And you know how it goes around that big square and people dance around, but it's a very kind of disorganized, unstructured dancing, which is indicative of what dancing on Simchas Torah is all about. But at the same time, it could be a little bit dangerous. You all know it's one of the Nisim, I guess, that we're going to record that happened in 770. When Mashiach comes, I'll talk about the Nisim that happened in 770. And one of the Nisim is that Baruch Hashem, nobody got hurt and no Sefer Torahs fell. And those of you that had the opportunity to go for Hakafas one of the nights, either Shmini Atzeres or Simchas Torah, you know what I'm talking about, especially if you were taken into the circle, you went into the circle yourself. It's like miraculous. You're wondering what's going to be with you. But the truth is there's a danger looming. And, you know, of course, the Rebbe is giving his brachas and protecting, obviously, which you can see pretty clearly if you watched it. That if you just stand from the side or you participate, you'll see it and you'll know it. And lo and behold, there was a moment that I was dreading, and I was right on the side. I saw a pileup of people. And you know, when people are rushing, hundreds and hundreds of people are rushing and pushing each other, if there's going to be anything that stops one person, it's going to have a domino effect. And everyone else is going to fall on everyone else in front of them. And I started worrying because people on the bottom were desperate. They were screaming. I was worried that maybe they can't breathe because it got bigger and bigger, the pile. So Baruch Hashem, it undid itself miraculously, like everything else that we are zeichet to have this crazy power. In shluchim, you hear on shlichus that they buy buildings that they didn't even have a down payment for. They never even had a dream of how they're going to be able to buy the building. And all the nisim and all the things that happen with Chassidim, and especially today with us Chassidim of the Rebbe. So I don't know exactly how it undid itself, but it got me thinking. And this, I think, is a tremendous mashal. There are pile-ups. There are stampedes, human stampedes, and you hear about on the news. And it doesn't have a very good outcome, a very good ending. Where people push it, if it's in a concert, that there's a fire broke out or something, or if it's in a Lahavdil in a mosque, there were like 700 people that died in a stampede. It's a very, very dangerous thing. Sometimes you hear stories. And I got to thinking, like, what is the problem with the stampede? The problem is very simple. You know who causes the biggest problem and they don't even know? The people in the back. The people in the back, they're actually having a good time. It's fun. We all know Simchas Beis Sheva, back office. You dance around, but you're young. You like to play a little bit, so you push the person in front of you. And a bunch of people start pushing a bunch of people, and everybody's having a good time. These people that are in the back and they're pushing, they don't have a clue that 30 feet away from them, there's people that are actually piled up and they're fighting for their life. What is causing the pressure? The pressure is not being caused by the person right behind them that's about to fall himself, because his pressure is limited. What's causing the main thrust, the force that's causing it to not be stoppable. You cannot stop it. You just feel like you're falling over. You want to stop, but you can't. Is the people that don't know what's going on, and they don't even have an idea that there's any reason why they should even think of not doing what they're doing, because it's in good humor. It's just fun. It's harmless. In the most case, someone's going to be pushed a little bit, uncomfortable. Now, what would you tell that person if your child was laying underneath the pile? You would love to tell him something, if you could only tell him something while you're watching your little child underneath the pile. The person that's in the back that you can't reach right now. And you know that it's critical that that person or those few people all the way in the back, they stop the pressure, because their pressure creates pressure in front of them, which creates more pressure. The buildup starts from the last people. What would you love to say to him? You would love to scream. If you only had a bullhorn, if you only had a long stick, if you could only get to that person and say, do you know how much what you do counts? Do you have any idea? Please pull back. I remember we're coming from Chof Zayin that the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka's Levaya, Allah Shalom, was very scary, Very, very scary. I want you to know there's video of it, but I was there, and I was then in Koil, and they gave us some bullhorns, some of the Koil Yungalite, to be in charge, to help make us say that we didn't anticipate what was happening. But I was standing on where the steps, where you go up the platform to the Weiber show, the mezzanine. And I was looking at the crowd, and Pashut, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people, and Kingston Avenue was simply too narrow for all these people. And all these people wanted to see and wanted to get to the front. After all, the Rebbe is there, it's the Rebbe's Levaya. Besides the fact that it's an historical moment and everyone wants to know that they were present at such a time, but it's spiritually, it's an important time, and you want to be as much as you can part of it. And I was begging the people behind, because I could see them, I was standing much higher. I said, please, just don't push forward. Pull back. If I told them to pull back, at least they won't pull forward. I remember the sakana mamish. I can't describe to you what was going on there. Nisim mamish. More than 770, because 770 was nowhere near that kind of a force, nowhere near that kind of crowd of people. So you want to tell this one person, sometimes it's one person that's pushing, and he's causing the person in front of him to push, and he's building up the whole enormous pressure that can't be stopped from in the front. The Rebbe is telling us, and I think that's the message of Chof Zayin Adar. And if you want to know something, 2 months before, in Gimel Shvat, 2 months or however much time, and somewhere like 2 months before, on Gimel Shvat, Tavshin Beis, you hear Rabbi Cohen spoke about Tavshin Beis. That's the year when, and Chof Zayin Adar is the day when the Rebbe had the stroke. 2 months before, the Rebbe said something that the Rebbe usually didn't really mention this topic. The Rebbe said that the doctor asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, listen to this, if you want a message from the Rebbe very close to the time of Chof Zayin Adar, here you have it. The Rebbe said that the doctor asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, because the Frierdiker Rebbe had a stroke, how come, why is it that Hashem took away your speech, your ability to talk, when your whole tool, your main tool to disseminate Chassidus, Hafatzas Hamayonas, Torah, Brachas, and your main tool to do that as a Rebbe is your mouth. The Rebbe is mentioning this a very close time to Chof Zayin Adar. Later, Chassidim realized, wow. But what did the Rebbe say in that Sikha? The Rebbe said in that Sikha that Moshe Rabbeinu had a speech impediment. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak clearly. He was a Ral Sfasayim. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Eibishter, why are you sending me to Parai? Hein ani a Ral Sfasayim. I can't speak, Eibishter. So the Rebbe said that the Eibishter's answer to Moshe is similar to the taina of the doctor to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe makes this comparison. Aaron is going to be your mouth. He's going to do the talking for you. You're going to talk, and he's going to clearly translate or clearly interpret. And the Rebbe says the answer to that question that the doctor had to the Frierdiker Rebbe is that all of us now that could talk, it's our responsibility to talk, to be the Frierdiker Rebbe's mouths. Yes? 2 minutes. Thank you. The 2-minute warning is there. So do you realize the responsibility? And looking back now what the Rebbe is telling us, and I know you're going to say, man, me, I know a big chassid who learns a lot of chassidus, he should say my morim for the Rebbe. Obviously, the Rebbe is meaning himself also here. When the Rebbe is telling us this, such a close time to Chof Zayin Adar, whatever applies to the Frierdiker Rebbe applies to us even more, because we're the Rebbe's chassidim. So I'm asking you a question. The first thing we're going to do is try to get ourselves out of this obligation, because it means a responsibility, and we don't like responsibilities. Why should we? So we're going to say to ourselves, oh, surely the Rebbe meant people, big chassidim with long white beard, elderly chassidim, advanced in chassidus, advanced in being Mekar of Yidden. No, that's not the point. The point is, Dafka somebody that can only serve as a tool, as a mouth for the Rebbe, that is where it counts the most, that even somebody like that, why do you think this whole thing is happening? This whole thing is happening, so we should become involved in the Rebbe's work as if it's really depending on us, and we have to do it for the Rebbe, and that's what makes us the biggest Chassidim possible, and that's what makes the Rebbe the biggest Rebbe possible, that he even made us into little Rebbes. He even made us do the work that he should be doing, so to say. And you have nothing to worry about, because the Rebbe still has a lot of work as a Rebbe. We're not taking away the Rebbe's work as a Rebbe, because we know that whatever we're saying and whatever we're doing is only with the Rebbe's koiches. But it's just like the child that has to walk. So basically, we're in a very special time right now. We're in Chodesh Adar. We're coming to Chodesh Adar Sheni, and the Rebbe says, Adar Beis, the Rebbe says that it's Shishim, Batal B'Shishim. You know how many times the Rebbe said that the negative is bottled by the 60 amount, 60 times the amount of the negative, by the 60 times against it, that is good. And that year was the Ibiyar. Rabbi Cohen mentioned it, but he just didn't point out one last thing, that it came out the same exact day of the week. Exactly the same kviyos. So it's batal b'shishim. And the Rebbe was preparing us and warning us, and that's why the Rebbe gave lekach. With a maimer after the tzav, he gave lekach. What is the Rebbe giving lekach in the middle of Adar? And he gave $2, and he gave it to men, women, and children, and he gave over 9,000 copies. Standing on his feet. For whom is it? For those that are going to need to be given it from the Rebbe, even after the people that are related to them, their parents or their brothers, could tell them this is what the Rebbe passed on to be passed on. So we have to remember our achrayus. So of course, our job is to believe and trust that right now we're going to have the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. And we have to do whatever it takes, because what we do counts. Thank you very much. Mashiach now.